The afternoon sun blazed overhead as I pushed my lawnmower across the front yard, sweat dripping down my back despite the Sando I wore. That's when I noticed her marching across the street, finger already extended like a weapon, her face twisted in righteous fury. Barbara Hutchinson, our self-appointed HOA enforcer, was on the warpath again. She stopped inches from my face, so close I could smell the artificial sweetener in her iced coffee, and launched into her tirade about community standards and property values. I was about to respond when she suddenly pivoted, stomped directly onto my lawn, and yanked my small American flag right out of the garden bed. The metal stake scraped against the decorative stones as she wrenched it free. That's when we both heard it, the quiet rumble of an engine behind her. Barbara froze mid-rant, flag still clutched in her manicured hand, as a patrol car rolled to a stop at my curb. It had started as just another scorching Saturday in Pine Valley Estates. The temperature had climbed past 90 degrees by noon, and I'd thrown on my most comfortable Sando, the navy blue one with a tiny hole near the hem, before heading out to tackle the lawn. I'd been doing this same routine every weekend for the 3 years since I'd moved in. Push the mower in neat diagonal lines, trim the edges, water the flower beds, all while dressed for the heat. But for the past month, Barbara had been watching from her window across the street, her disapproval growing more obvious with each passing week. Barbara Hutchinson wasn't technically the HOA president, but she acted like she owned the entire neighborhood. At 52, with her perfectly styled blonde bob and designer athleisure, where that never saw actual athletic use, she'd appointed herself the guardian of what she called neighborhood decorum. She believed that anything less than business casual in public view was destroying the fabric of our community. She'd corner people at the mailbox cluster to lecture them about their choice of gardening attire. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes on windshields about the proper way to display holiday decorations. And lately, she'd turned her laser focus on me and my weekend lawn care wardrobe. The harassment started small. I'd catch her snapping photos from her driveway while I worked, her phone held high like she was gathering evidence for a crime scene. Then came the loud comments whenever I was within earshot. She'd be on her phone, volume turned up just enough for me to hear, complaining to whoever would listen about the decline of neighborhood standards. She'd use phrases like moral decay and property value destruction while staring directly at me. I tried to ignore it, focusing on keeping my lawn pristine, while she focused on my tank top like it was made of offensive slogans instead of plain cotton fabric. The complaints to the HOA board came next. Barbara filed formal grievances every few days, each one more dramatic than the last. She claimed I was creating a hostile environment for families. She insisted that my attire was inappropriate for a residential setting. She even suggested that my Sando wearing was part of a larger pattern of disrespect for community values. The HOA board, to their credit, responded to each complaint with increasing exasperation. Board member Tom Garrison personally stopped by one evening to apologize for the constant notifications. He assured me that there was absolutely no dress code for homeowners on their own property and that Barbara's complaints were being dismissed as fast as she could file them. But Barbara's frustration only intensified with each failed complaint. She started timing her own yard work to coincide with mine, always finding reasons to be outside when I was. She'd water plants that didn't need watering, inspect her mailbox multiple times, or pretend to pick up non-existent litter from her driveway, all while shooting daggers across the street. The situation reached a boiling point on that sweltering Saturday when my next-door neighbor, elderly Mr. Peterson, stopped to chat while I took a water break. We were discussing his tomato plants, both of us seeking refuge in the shade of my oak tree, when Barbara spotted us from her kitchen window. I had just pulled off my Sando to wring out the sweat when Barbara came storming across the street. Her face was crimson, whether from anger or the heat, I couldn't tell, and she was moving with the determination of someone on a crusade. Mr. Peterson took one look at her approach and mumbled something about needing to check his sprinkler system before retreating to his backyard. Barbara didn't even wait for him to clear the property line before launching into her assault. She started yelling about public decency and community standards before she even reached my driveway. Her voice carried across the entire cul-de-sac as she demanded I put on proper clothing immediately. She insisted that my bare chest was traumatizing children who might glance out their windows, though I hadn't seen a single kid outside all day due to the heat. When I calmly put my Sando back on and asked her to leave my property, she seemed to snap. That's when she marched onto my lawn, her pristine white sneakers crushing my carefully maintained grass, and grabbed the small American flag I had planted near my flower bed. She yanked it out with such force that dirt scattered across the mulch I just laid the previous weekend. She waved the flag in my face like evidence of some greater crime, ranting about how I was disrespecting the flag by displaying it while dressed inappropriately. The metal stake swung dangerously close to my chest as she gestured wildly. That's when I took a step back and calmly informed her that she was now trespassing on private property and that my security cameras, which I'd installed after her photo taking sessions began, were recording everything. I pointed to the visible camera mounted under my eave, its red light blinking steadily. Barbara glanced at it, then back at me, her grip on my flag tightening as her face grew even redder. Instead of backing down, Barbara doubled her efforts. She declared that she had every right to be on my property as a concerned member of the HOA Enforcement Committee, a committee I was fairly certain didn't exist. When I pulled out my phone to call the non-emergency police line, she laughed and said no officer would take the side of someone who couldn't even dress properly in their own yard. I dialed anyway, speaking calmly to the dispatcher while Barbara continued her tirade in the background. She was now adding destruction of neighborhood unity to her list of my supposed crimes. The dispatcher asked if I felt threatened, and I explained that while Barbara hadn't touched me, she was refusing to leave my property and had damaged my landscaping by ripping out the flag. I could hear typing on the other end as the dispatcher took down the details. Barbara must have heard me mention the security footage because she suddenly pivoted toward my garden gnome, a whimsical piece my niece had given me for my birthday. She kicked it with surprising force, sending the cheerful ceramic figure tumbling into my roses. The gnome's pointed hat broke off on impact, and that's when I added vandalism to my report. The patrol car arrived within 8 minutes, though it felt much longer with Barbara's non-stop commentary about civic duty and moral obligations. Two officers emerged. Officer Chan and Officer Williams, according to their badges, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else on this hot afternoon. They approached calmly, taking in the scene of Barbara still clutching my flag while I stood on my porch steps, phone in hand. Officer Chen asked for a brief explanation of the situation, and I gestured to my security camera while explaining the afternoon's events. Barbara immediately launched into her own version, insisting she was performing a civic duty by addressing my inappropriate attire and disrespectful behavior. She claimed authority under HOA regulations, waving my flag for emphasis and nearly hitting Officer Williams in the process. When they asked to see the security footage, I pulled it up on my phone, with showing them the clear progression from her marching onto my property to yanking out the flag to kicking my garden gnome. The officers exchanged glances that suggested this wasn't their first encounter with an overzealous HOA enthusiast. Officer Chin asked Barbara to return my property and leave the premises. She clutched the flag tighter, insisting she was confiscating it as evidence for the HOA board. When Officer Williams explained that she had no legal authority to take items from my property, she invoked something she called community enforcement privileges, which seemed to be entirely of her own invention. The officer's patience was clearly wearing thin as the temperature continued to climb, and Barbara showed no signs of compliance. After several more warnings, each met with increasingly wild claims about her authority and my crimes against the neighborhood. Officer Chen radioed for a supervisor. Barbara seemed to take this as validation, announcing that once their supervisor arrived, they'd understand the importance of maintaining standards. She then spotted my new solar lights along the walkway and declared them another violation, though of what she didn't specify. When she moved toward them, Officer Williams stepped between her and my landscaping, firmly telling her not to touch anything else. The situation deteriorated rapidly when Barbara tried to push past Officer Williams